today, the First Lady, and she's expressed a desire to sing our song. So, here's how we do it. I hope Gary hasn't forgotten the tune. I hope you haven't forgotten the words. I hope I haven't forgotten the words. And I hope you haven't forgotten the words. One, two, three. Take me out to the ball. Me out to the buy me some.
The Monday morning quarterback on the 12th of November 2018, beaming from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Happy Veterans Day. This is the official Veterans Day today. It was on Sunday, the 11th of November. We normally have a special Veterans Day program, the plight of veterans. We'll do that in the next few days, where we talk more about just the day, but the plight of veterans in terms of their health care primarily, and benefits and the life of veterans today. There was also a celebration in Paris of World War I, the big daddy of imperialistic wars, no doubt about it. There was light rain, and DJ Trump didn't make his part of it, but the other so-called allies were there. The British, the French, etc. They were involved in World War I. We'll have to put that in a little about World War I 100 years ago, why it happened. Some historians said one of the big reasons for that was literally simply boredom. It was supposedly the war to end all wars. It was fought on a barbaric level, no doubt about that. That is one of the things we'll not quibble about, the number of casualties that were taken there. My grandfather was in that, G3 was there and was in France, so a lot of people were there. A lot of people ended up dying there in France. Let's start first with from the San Diego Union, a reliable newspaper. And this is dated on, we have to look to find a date here. On the 11th, Mexico reshaping approach to Central American immigrants as caravans push north. This is by Sander Dibble. The caravan of Central Americans currently traveling northwest through Mexico are but the tip of the iceberg, a massive and on-scene flow of immigrants at Mexico's southern border with Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. A high-ranking appointee is in the incoming administration. This is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. The caravans are not the problem, said Ghislaine Lopez, who will take over as the head of Mexico's National Immigration Institute, known as the INAMI, when the new administration takes office. And that'll be within a few weeks, on the 1st of December. The issue is a movement. We do not see those who are not in the caravan is the big issue. DJ Trump, angered by thousands of Central Americans making their way in larger caravans to the border, has been pushing Mexico to step up its enforcement efforts. But the Mexican incoming president is championing a different approach to invest in impoverished areas of Central America and Southern Mexico, as so that people don't feel forced to leave. The central problem, and this is back to a maximum put forward by the American civil rights leader, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. When you have development, you don't need aid, and that's the problem. I mean, once you get development going, or whatever fashion it takes, then you will create jobs. Back to the article here. You can't manage these movements if at the same time you don't have a development program. They go hand in hand. The caravans have put the spotlight on the rising number of Central Americans who are fleeing communities that are beset by poverty and rampant violence. If we don't come up with development and initiatives based on international cooperation, we don't confront the problem of Honduras and its crisis, we're going to have the same cycle every time and more amplified. That's Lopez Gillen there. The numbers are reaching levels not seen for more than a decade. That is Ernestino Rodriguez Chavez, an immigration scholar at the Colegio de la Frontera Norte, a government-funded think tank with offices along the northern border and in Mexico City. His estimate puts the current annual flow of undocumented crossing from Central America to the U.S. through Mexico at between 350 to 400,000 people. The calculation considers the crossing river van people, as some individuals may cross more than once. Much of the traffic takes place out of sight at night in small flows, Rodriguez said, to escape the attention of the Mexican immigration authorities. Rodriguez said that compares with early flows that the current exodus includes a rise in the proportion of women, particularly children, through though male migrants continue to make up a larger proportion of those attempting to reach the U.S. Many don't make it to the U.S. as Mexico authorities detain tens of thousands each year. That's a report from the INAMI from January to September 2018. 80,000 deportations from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, with close to half of them from Honduras. Still, the hardening of the U.S. border means a growing number of Central Americans are opting to stay in Mexico. This poses a challenge for the new president, who had vowed to respect the human rights and promote social welfare. Mexico has always been seen itself as a transit country and not a receiving country for immigrants, as from Eric Olson, a senior advisor at the Woodrow Wilson Institute for International Studies, that is in Washington, D.C. But the reality seems that more and more Central Americans are settling in Mexico. What kind of policy Mexico is going to adopt to make sure that these people are settling in Mexico are going to receive the protection they deserve as they prepare to, as he prepares to assume the presidency. Lopez Obrador has said he will offer work permits to Central Americans in Mexico and is asking for collaboration of the U.S. and Canada to invest in southern Mexico and Central America as a means to stem immigration. This is not a problem that can be confronted with only the use of force. With cohesive measures, human rights must be guaranteed, he said last month in a stop in Chiapas. Lopez Obrador's approach of investing in communities that so many are fleeing is of a long-term approach to stop out immigration, but it is unlikely to have much effect in the short term. That's an Andrew Seeley, president of Migration Policy Institute, that's in Washington. The Trump administration's pressure to immediately stop the northward flow, and Lopez Obrador's focus on getting at the root cause. And this is a problem, and it's a problem of much of the American policy. We can recall Katrina. They had a law enforcement policy there. They did not have a human outreach policy in New Orleans. And that is one of the big problems with this whole approach. The law enforcement approach is just a Band-Aid, and only a Band-Aid. And this has been part of the American, even foreign policy, of having a force approach. For the Woodrow Wilson policy, that goes from the Mideast on. If you look in the Zionist state, what all they have there is a elimination policy, not a policy to promote coexistence between the factions in the Mideast. And if you look at the recent wars in Afghanistan, which is still going on, accomplished absolutely nothing in 15 years. If you go to Iraq, the situation there was more chaotic than before the murder of President Saddam Hussein. So this goes on, and this is what has caused primarily the problems of immigrants in Europe. It's both a political situation caused by these regimes that were established on the neocolonial outlook. There are people around that literally have not read the history. They have no comprehension of the influence of colonial powers across the Mideast, across Africa and Asia. That boundaries were literally drawn up in Germany willy-nilly. And that just simply will not do. And the problem you have going into Central America, that you have impoverished countries, and these we go to Honduras, El Salvador, etc. The reason that you have the impoverishment there, and the reason that you have the gangs there, is primarily the policy of the North Americanos. Their so-called drug enforcement policy, the war there on various factions in support of right-wing dictators. That is what the problem is. So what you've had is you've had a law enforcement policy where the right-wing dictators and their cronies get rich, the people get poor, the people also get terrorized. And out of that atmosphere, you have these gangs that are established. Some of them actually were established for self-protection, others were not, and that is why they're in the drug trade. Now, one way to put out the fire is, in many of the states now, the legalization of cannabis. As cannabis becomes legalized, that takes the pressure off of the drug trade. And as far as the opioid epidemic is concerned, a lot of that is homegrown, some of it is not. But that can be controlled. That is more of a social problem. Medico would have no reason to do this. Gillian said we all need to share the responsibility. Medico has already received a large number of Central Americans, and the main issue is that we need to move forward in a regional approach. No doubt about that. Gillian will be one of a handful of players involved in crafting and carrying out the new administration's immigration policies. Agents staffed by 5,800 workers who carried a wide range of roles from citizenship services to migrant protection to border enforcement. In academic, Gillian has brought a different profile to the agencies whose leadership in recent years has come from intelligence and law enforcement communities, and has been criticized by human rights advocates and immigrant advocates for the OPEC bureaucracy that forces corruption and abuse on immigrants. Gillian has spoken out against the force last month by the Mexican Federal Police at the southern border against members of the first Central American caravan that were pushing through, calling it a serious error. Now, this is a step in the right direction. A social scientist by training, Gillian, that's spelled Guillen. has specialized in the study of public administration for many years and was based in Tijuana. Now that is right across from San Diego, where he rose to become the president of the Cabildo de la Frontera Norte, which, when in his term into the last year, he had transformed to a public research center in Mexico City, Centro Geo, heading up an ambitious project involving 91 researchers and 36 subjects focused on the southern Mexican border. The new administration is also thinking beyond the southern border and envisioning development programs in the area of Central America that many have been fleeing, programs that could be supported by a coalition of nations, including the U.S. and Canada and members of the European community. In other words, the idea to internationalize the plight of these immigrants. And that is the only way they will get a solution. The American troops at the border is only a police action with barbed wire. That means nothing. It costs the American people more to police the border and build these so-called trivial walls than it would be to bring about actual development programs and put pressure on these tin-pan dictators there to move on. They are not needed in 2018. We can start with 5 in Honduras and 2 in Guatemala and El Salvador. I said we have to start, and we don't. We're going to continue with these problems, but they're going to worsen. There's no doubt about that. And San Diego, of course, being on the absolute border with Mexico. And we get one other article while we're on the West Coast here. This is Paradise is Gone. It's gone. Paradise is gone. Fire destroyed a town, taking so many lives with it. This is also from the San Diego Union Tribune. This is by Luis Sogum and Lyndon Dillon and Michael Flanagan. They are the reporters here. 2 days after the wall of flame devoured the entire Sierra foothills town of Paradise. In minutes, free firefighters set about surveying the damage Saturday so they could report back to evacuees they had grown up with on what they have seen. And they just list some of the firefighters here: an engineer named Phil Rose and a firefighter named A.J. Mott. And Sousa shook his head in sadness as he took in the scorched, smoky landscape. It was a vast patchwork of ash piled mangled metal and skeletal pines of more than 100 feet tall in a once thriving neighborhood of retirees and young families. There's no easy way to say it, as they said. I have a text, sorry brother, but it's gone at least 30 times in the last 48 hours. Moments later, the firefighters climbed into engine 82 and trawled down a winding 2-lane road, dodging a tangent of severed power lines and smoldering trees that threatened to top into debris scattered around the once quiet town, and soon they found rubble of yet another house that, until the fire swept through, was adorned with a white picket fence. I just text the sad news about the house and enchanting pocket of Paradise only 48 hours ago. The bodies of an additional 14 people killed by a campfire were discovered this Saturday, bringing the total to 23. Some people are still missing. Remains of 10 were found in Paradise, 7 of them in homes, and 4 more were in the surrounding areas of Butte County. 2 of them in cars. Families of missing persons were submitting DNA at a lab truck to help identify victims. Campfire is already the most destructive in California's history, destroying 6,453 homes and 260 commercial buildings in less than 24 hours. Residents who were able to outrun the fire say they still can't fathom how much of their town was lost, and imagine how many of their neighbors might be gone. We not only lost our homes, said Sue Brown, we lost our whole community. It's gone. Paradise is gone. Brown and her husband Sidney, who planned to spend their retirement in their 3-bedroom house in Paradise, got a half-hour warning to evacuate. Sidney had taken off his wedding ring, and because of swollen fingers, lost it in the blaze. The couple had been trying to keep busy by volunteering at an Elks Lodge evacuation center in nearby Chino. Oh, okay, we know where this is. Sue Brown doesn't expect the gravity of what happened to sink in until they return to their property. Let me move along here and finish this article up. Excuse me, my allergies. For Engine 82 crew taking stock of the damage, there were occasional bits of good news that could text to distressed evacuees. They were able to tell a few folk that we rescued a cat or a dog. Mont said that meant a lot to them. All 3 firefighters on the truck had seen action in the Mideast when they were Marines or in the Navy. But on Saturday, they were overcome by the scale of devastation in Paradise. It exceeded anything they'd ever seen. In past years, I fought fires that roared through some areas, taking one neighborhood at a time. Susie said, but for me, this is the first big fire that actually ate up an entire community. 27,000 residents that could be used... that used to be, a beautiful little mountain town in which to enjoy the best life had to offer. We found comfort in their mission as scouts, sending damage assessments back. And with the invention of texting, that was all we had to do. They had to do, it will bring confirmation to some in their mind's eye. Rose said it's also confirmation that we need to continue on. So that's the story of the mountain town of Paradise from the paper in San Diego. And that's the first time we at this mic had explored the Paradise fire in its entirety. We had not seen sketches of it from Reuters and, of course, from Senator Fluke, some of her posts on the fire period. And another warning here, potentially dangerous mountain wave winds could slam East Country on Monday. National Weather Service had said the foothills in East County, I'm not sure where that is, could be hit on Monday by the Santa Ana's winds that struck with the usual speed and power. I noticed that Professor Reed has reported that in Berkeley they need a breathing apparatus, and we of course posted on his site one that has filters that would solve that problem. The depth toll jumped to 129 in a campfire, with more than 200 still not accounted for. So in other words, you have quite a few people that have, for one reason or the other, not been accounted have not been accounted for, so we can just look and see where those people are there. So we'll move on now from Paradise, as we covered the fire actually the best we could, and on to Florida. Breaking news here. This is in Tallahassee, Florida. Andrew Gillum tells church that count is not done before heading to recount ground zero here. And this is just, we just saw this. Not sure why we're having some problems here this morning. Okay. Gillum tells church final recount's not done. We read that headline there. One of the things about Florida, where we'll hear the recounts in Florida, not unusual. The entire voting system in Florida is Veterans Day here. As a report, this is in Tallahassee. The city of Tallahassee administration offices will be closed on Veterans Day. Well, that's no big deal there. They usually are closed on Veterans Day. Florida recount here, going on here. These papers. 99 cents for the first week. Well, we're not interested in 99 cents for the first week. We don't ordinarily use this paper, and I guess we're kind of out of business on the Tallahassee Democrat. Anyway, we'll move on here. Oops. We do know it's 58 degrees there. I'm not sure why we got the weather report. The high today will be 75 in Tallahassee, Florida. And that's basically all we have, other than a college football score. So we don't really want a college football score. We know that Florida State beat Tulane, and we're having all kinds of problems here with this. I'm not sure why we're having them, but anyway. We will move on, as they say, from Florida, and okay. We'll head next to Nate Silver's shop here. Races that are still too close to call, and this was written. Nathaniel Rankin, it looks like, and it always. This is updated on the 11th. It was updated yesterday. We're still upholding the text below with the latest news, etc. And this is the Senate race here in Arizona, Florida, and Mississippi. Arizona, that's Kristen Sinema. Has a 1.4% lead there over McSally. An analyst at the state office estimated that 294,000 votes have yet to be counted statewide, including more than 36,000 in blue leading Prima County and 198,000 in Maricopa County, that is Phoenix. The state is issuing updates, totals at 5 p.m. local time every day. So far, Sinema has gained from every update, and McSally needs to deal with the trend. We at the Ouija board, that is our model, and the other short-term model, the slide rule, have looked at this race, and we are moving this race to likely Democrat. We usually don't use those terms, but to just outright call this race for Sinema. We'll see what happens today at 5 in the state of Arizona. In Florida, the recount is underway in Bryan and Palm Beach counties. Scott's lead has narrowed to 0.15 percentage points, or 12,000 votes, and counting down. That's important because under Florida law, any election within a half percentage point triggers a machine recount, and then after, if the election is within a quarter of a percentage point, it triggers a manual recount. So state officials have already have a machine recount going on, and that will go on to Thursday, the 15th of November. Unusually high numbers of undervotes in the Senate race in Broward County, results of machine error. And if so, Nelson may have a shot. If not, Scott is probably safe, as recounts rarely overturn election results. That is actually factual, but it really depends on a lot of things here. Where recounts are, we could say the same thing with McSally, but that's a different situation. There, as you get within roughly 12,000 votes, it's a long shot, but it could be. We'll see. In Mississippi, it's a different situation there. Hyde Smith is favored against Mike Espy. Mike Espy being an African American in Mississippi. We need not say anything else. 5 races out in California: the 10th, 39th, and 45th, 48th, and 49th. If not unusually for close races in California, still to be uncalled. California, of course, vote by mail there in the state of California. And we still have some situations in Florida 7, that's Democrat Carol Boudreaux, I suppose is how you pronounce it, has not yet conceded. It may be a recount with Woodell, who has a lead of less than 1,000 votes. And there are 1,500 provisional ballots left to count in Gwinnett County, 90 in Forsyth County. And I'm not sure about Maine here. Oh, that's Bruce Palmquist has declared that he received more votes than the Democrat there, Jared Golden, but neither have received a majority of the votes. That's in Maine. So you have a few out here. New Mexico and the second district, Wyvern Herald until Wednesday night, when the absentee ballots was from Doana and County, unexpectedly put the Democrat small into a 1% lead. So we have a lot of those going on. Even one in New York, 22, some people call that. That is Representative Claudia Tenney isn't ready to concede. Absentee ballots, military ballots are to be counted. That's a margin of about 1,230 votes there. Been a roller coaster ride also in Texas 23. That is Will Hurd. Initially declared a victor, but then a last minute spout of ballots put the Democrat Gina Ortiz Jones into the lead. He currently has a lead. This is Hurd here of 1,000 votes. Jones says that she will not concede till every vote is counted. We have a lot of those going on here. In Florida, DeSantis was declared the next governor on election night. He declared himself, but not the same delay in counting that tightened the Florida Senate race has brought the gubernatorial contest into recount range as well. DeSantis leads Mr. Gillum by 0.14 percentage points. Therefore, the Secretary of State ordered a machine recount. Gillum has taken back his concession, and ABC and EP have both retracted their projections. Well, this is one of the problems with projections now. With our Ouija board model, we projected Gillum as the winner there. Finally, the gubernatorial race in Georgia. That's between Stacey Abrams and Kemp. Kemp needs to win 50% plus 1. Now, otherwise, a December 4th runoff on official results on the website give Kemp 50.3 of the vote with 100% reporting. However, this doesn't include some absentee ballots and provisional ballots, which become a flashpoint in the race's closing days. So, in other words, all of these out. The Secretary of Office, Abrams would need to net 22,000 votes in order to deny Kemp a majority, and the Secretary's office said there are only 17,500 votes left to count. But the Abrams campaign refuses to concede, arguing that there are uncounted ballots and threatening illegal action. So in other words, these are still out there, and they remain out there, and so we have a lot of contention going on, no doubt about that. Finally, in Illinois, marijuana or cannabis rising. Illinois just elected a weed friend. This Chicago Tribune governor, and the Chicago pot companies are on the move. In the past 6 months, Illinois' marijuana companies have gone public in Canada, raising hundreds of millions of dollars to fund expansion and consolidate a number of deals, one topping 680,000. State's medical marijuana companies are moving at a fast and furious pace. DJ Pitker is the new governor. Cannabis companies say the stars are aligning for growth, and born just 3 years ago in Illinois, a pilot program for patients with a limited number of medical conditions. Serco Labs, which in the past month has raised $100 million, you can believe that, announced plans to acquire dispensaries and go public in Canada. Thus, an hour's drive from Chicago. The pot industry gained a foothold nationally in midterm elections too. In Michigan, that's an hour's drive from Chicago. It became the 10th state and first state in the Midwest to legalize recreational marijuana. Missouri and Utah approved medical marijuana. So the whole situation is that more and more states are legalizing cannabis, and that's also created some problems at airports, depending on what state you're in. California, you're in good shape if you bring it on board at the airplane. Now this Crico hopes that the deal will be subject to regulation, shareholders' approval, and some other things. Crico hopes to be the next. The company's headquarters in North River, where they are headquartered. They operate 3 cultivation centers in Illinois and just finished expanding it in Joliet. Other growers have similar acquisitions. For growers and operating dispensaries means access to customers. The dispensaries join national companies that are better capitalized. So we have Crico, Pharmaceutical Can, and so forth and so on in the state of Illinois. Old Bruce Reamers, in one of his final acts, signed legislation this summer that allows persons prescribed opiates to use medical marijuana. There are 46,000 so far, but this is expanding on a daily basis. Most of the growers in Illinois have additional land near the facility in which they can expand, and many already have plans to draw it up. GTI, another one there, is also in the business. Let us do the sports now. And we'll do the NBA and college football scores from last night. And let's take a break here. WBRN Radio, and we are back. And we'll go to the scores in the National Basketball League, National Hockey League, hopefully, and college basketball as we struggle through here. And we're going to take another break. We're having some little technical. All right, these are the scores in college football. The top 25 week 11. Wake Forest 27-23 over North Carolina State. Louisville and Syracuse, that was on Friday night. Syracuse 54-23. Fresno State and Boise State. Boise State 24-17. Now these are the Saturday scores. Number 1 Alabama 24 to shut out Mississippi State. Clemson and Boston College. Clemson 27-7 over Boston College. Florida State and Notre Dame. 42-13. Michigan and Rutgers. Michigan 42-7 over Rutgers. Auburn in Georgia. A high-spirited game, but nonetheless not much scoring here. Georgia 27-10. Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, a 1-point game. Oklahoma 48-47. LSU and Arkansas. LSU 24-17. Washington State in Colorado. Washington State 31-7. TCU and West Virginia. It was all West Virginia 47-10. Ohio State and Michigan State. It was Ohio State 26-6, and they're ranked 10th. Michigan State was ranked 18th. Kentucky ranked 11th, and Tennessee, I guess you'd call this an upset. Tennessee 24-7. Navy and UCF. UCF 35-24. South Carolina and Florida. Florida 35-31. Texas and Texas Tech. It was Texas over the Red Raiders 41-34. And Wisconsin and Penn State, it was all Penn State, 22-10. Northwestern and Iowa, 14-10 there. Northwestern, Iowa was ranked 21. Baylor and Iowa State, it was Iowa State 28-14. And the hockey scores, the Wild and Blues in St. Louis, it was a Wild 3-1. The Senators and Panthers, it was the Panthers 5-1, it looks like here. I'll give you the wrong score here. The Coyotes and... There we go. All right, back to normal here. And let me just check. Well, anyway, we'll get back to that. The Golden Knights and the Bruins in Boston. Bruins 4-1. Bruins are winning one. The Devils and Jets, it was Jets 6-2 over the Devils. The Flames and Sharks. Sharks 3-1. And finally the Avalanche and Oilers. It was Avalanche 4-1. And we've disposed of the music here once again. I'm not sure why we're being serenaded this morning, but it sometimes happens. A quick look with the old glasses here. It was the Panthers 5-1 over the Senators. Anyway, let's go to the NBA, and we wait. A note here, we are planning a special program on the 2018 elections. Look back at some of the polls, what actually happened, and we have to wait. Anyway, nonetheless, the basketball score, the Hornets were at the Pistons. Hornets 113-102. The Pacers were at the Rockets in Houston. The Rockets 115-103. The Magic were at the Knickerbockers. It was a Magic 115-89. The Bucks and Nuggets in Denver. It was Bucks 121-14 for the Nuggets. The Celts were out in Portland. Trailblazers 100-94. And finally, the Hawks were in Los Angeles. Lakers 107-106. Since there are more than one team in Los Angeles now, we have the Clippers there and the Lakers. We have to be very careful from times past when we would just say the Lakers. This will finally do it for us at the Monday morning quarterback. of WBRN Radio on the 12th of November, 2018. Again, happy Veterans Day. For those that are veterans, we remember them, particularly in World War II. It gets a little bit tenuous when we go to Vietnam, and there's no comment on these other Mideast so-called conflicts that have been out there. It's sort of like on the border. Troops there are out in the heat on the U.S. medical border, and they're on what we used to call sea rations, basically. They can't even go get a McDonald's burger. So they're not very happy, no doubt about it, and they are waiting the caravan to get there. And what will happen then? Well, the people from Honduras, El Salvador, will present their papers at the border, and they will be processed. Either they will wait on the medical side, or they will be in various tent cities, wherever they will put them. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you on the Monday Morning Quarterback next week.